to the cloud, and we go and Nicholas Gruen, how you going, brother?
Hi there. Here I
Making me
am.
laugh again. We fired all our best shots before we even started recording, as usual. But
well, that's a relief to me.
Try and get them back.
Well, we
You're
get
just
back
making
in
me
another
laugh with this
You
email. You're showing me this
had-
email where you just basically skull dragged some poor guy across cyberspace, and you called the ideas conceptually flaccid. So you're talking about conceptually flaccid management theories. Anyway, I love that you're doing this, because there's a lot of conceptually flaccid stuff out there. Particularly in management and all this sort of stuff, where they have these theories that they're not really theories. They're just
they're not theory.
A half-baked hypothesis, and they've jumped straight to
like it's not even a hypothesis.
But floating it out into the world. Oh, it'd be a hypothesis if they were willing to test it in some way. But off they go. They launch it, whatever their idea is. They call it a theory, and it's So anyway, this is a competition, cooperation, polarity. Anyway, jump into it and just
Well, I'll read you a passage.
I'll read you a passage.
So let's not worry where it comes from. Let's not worry where it comes from, even though somebody, if they want to take down all the words, can probably Google it up. But this is what it says.
Yeah.
In the case of the competition, cooperation, polarity, by the way, this is called polarity theory. Fuck me. In the case of the competition, cooperation, polarity, for example.
This is what they've written to you. Yeah, the passage.
No, this is in some book or something.
Right.
In the case of the competition, cooperation, polarity, for example, unrestrained competition, in the absence of a larger agreement to play by the rules and cooperate, can quickly devolve into a dog-eat-dog condition wherein defensiveness saps productivity. Conversely, cooperation by itself, without the incentive or opportunity for individual excellence or creativity, can similarly devolve into groupthink or stifling bureaucratic mediocrity. But when competition and cooperation are brought together in a mutually correcting relationship that provides for both challenge and support, the value-creating potential of each side is maximized. Now, that's a perfectly unexceptionable paragraph. It's a perfectly unexceptionable paragraph.
It doesn't give you any
insight. It doesn't give you any insight into the relationship of these two things. It talks about something. It seems very kind of expansive. This is the sort of thing that where people say, well, we've gone beyond linear thinking, all this kind of stuff. And it says something that is just unexceptionable. It isn't, nobody who doesn't know this stuff really. So I'm comparing that to some observation. I mean, I don't want to, I'm not saying here do exactly what I'm doing, but to give you why I reacted to that passage is that this is a passage from someone who's telling us that they've got this new theory and they call it polarity theory, and it's a really great idea. And they haven't thought about what can they say about cooperation and competition other than that unrestrained competition isn't great and unrestrained cooperation and sort of pure cooperation and pure competition aren't really the best. We want some mix. No kidding. But one way you can start getting into that and say something that people haven't thought much about is that there is competition, and then there is the terms on which that competition takes place. And you can further say that if you want competition, then you want private striving, you want individual people doing different things and trying to be better than each other, competing. And then look at this other thing, which is the terms on which that competition takes place. You don't want
is this what's meant by
hang on, let me finish.
I'm just going to bookmark and flag that. Come back to it.
Yeah, good, absolutely. You don't. Now, what I'm saying is something. Now, I'm saying something which actually has a bit of content to it, which is that if you want to talk about the terms of the competition, that has to be a cooperative discussion. And one of the things that's going wrong in the world is that take those two expressions for the two slogans for the abortion debate: pro-life, pro-choice. what's happening there is that people are trying to slant the terms of the competition. They're trying to slant the terms on which a debate takes place, rather than say, we disagree, we should try to compete to some extent, but we should be agreeing on the terms of our engagement so that we actually, so it might lead not to agreement, but to some enlightenment rather than a cascade of misunderstanding. So in competition, you want private individuals doing different things than their best. And when you're thinking about the terms of the competition, that's a public good and needs to be dealt with cooperatively. And that's what's wrong with Twitter and all these other things, that there aren't terms of engagement. There aren't understood terms of engagement. Everyone's trying to trump everyone else and grab hold of the high ground by the way they frame an issue. So that's something that's worth thinking about. But just saying, oh, well, you want a balance between competition and cooperation. No kidding. Now tell me what your bookmark was, unless you want to go on with this.
Oh my God, I can work my way back to it, but then you went into abortion. And that just I don't want to talk
about abortion. I don't want to talk about the merits of abortion.
For that example of the kind of push-pull that you're talking about, it's it just made me think of the cancelled comic that I don't know if we're allowed to even say his name, but Louis C.K. Did you ever come across him? All right,
I haven't come across him, but I'm aware that he's been cancelled recently.
Turns out he was this horrendous sex pest in the end, so he's finished.
Yeah.
But before he was finished, he said his comedy was like, he said some awful things. But he made that he made that same point you were making there, but in an awful way, with reference to abortion, when he said, abortion is either murdering baby, when he was saying, this is my opinion about abortion, that it's either murdering babies or it's just like going to the toilet. But only one of those two things. So that's how he expressed it. Through a joke, he sort of made clear that insane sort of polarity, this weird polarity.
Well, in which case, if you're going to have a debate, with it's one of the reasons why I don't really like debating abortion. I don't have strong views on it, but I don't like debating it for precisely that reason, that it's really about the way people see things, and I think it can legitimately be seen in two very different ways. So what do you?
I can't debate it because it's women's business. It's women's business, so it's none of my fucking business. I can't have an opinion about that.
Anyway,
I can't have an opinion about that because that belongs to women. That's for women to sort out, which I guess is an opinion.
Well, and which is and not only that, but which is a framing. It's
a framing, which is also I don't know. It's a way that I can express a frame, but then express an opinion without expressing an opinion, without being held accountable for it. So it's one of my favorite ways to avoid accountability or engagement.
To slip the tackle.
That's it. So this brings us back to this. So competition and cooperation. So what you were talking about before, maybe it's in this term mutually correcting relationship that this fellow's used here. So this idea that there's a mutually correcting relationship between competition and cooperation, that when that happens, then that sort of creates value creating potential, which, oh my God, don't we all want that?
I don't want to disagree.
So, does that mean, is there kind of like a regulatory feedback loop happening, so that there's competition and that's getting out of control, but then the need for cooperation somehow creates a negative feedback loop and regulates it and takes the temperature down. But then as soon as everybody gets too lovey-dovey and amotivated, then all of a sudden the competition's kicked back in again, and somehow there's this freaking equilibrium going on. And doesn't that just sound like the same old crap that's been coming out of game theory, that's been coming out of neoliberal theories since 1938, I think they started playing around with that crap.
38, good, well dated. It was at the Walter Lippmann Colloquium.
That's it. People don't know that it's that freaking old. And people say it's not even. People say it's not even true. It's not even a real thing. It's just something that lefties call something else. and that it's not even a real force in the universe. But I tell you, it certainly bloody is. Yeah, and I tell you, that school has the whole discipline of neoliberalism. The reason for its amazing success is because it doesn't have this polarity. It has so many. It embraces so many different theories. It's Chicago school, come in. Austrian, come in. Whatever you want. Every school will embrace it as long as it's all coming towards the same bloody thing, which is disenfranchising every goddamn human being on the planet. They embrace lots of different theories, and they're not really arguing too much about it. I mean, they did a bit in 38, but as far as I can see, they didn't really after that. They were quite happy to just bring everybody to the table and hear all the stories and just take what bloody worked in different situations and different contexts. It became very context dependent, and they were able to pivot. They were able to be actually agile and kick ass in the world to the point that they now run shit. From very humble origins. Anyway, so maybe they're the ones who have sorted out this polarities business, and in ways that aren't conceptually flaccid.
No, well, what they did was
we need
they
to start
came
talking
up.
to neoliberals.
What's that?
Maybe we need to start talking to neoliberals and find out the.
Well, I recommend it because I was just, in fact, you and I first met on a panel with the RSA Stewardship of Country. Yeah. And at the end of my presentation, I read out the words of Friedrich Hayek in the first meeting of the Mont Pelerin Society in 1947. So Friedrich Hayek went to this thing called the Walter Lippmann Colloquium in Paris in 1938, and then World War II intervened, and then he got back on the campaign. And by 1947, he'd raised the funding to invite the right-leaning economists, social philosophers of Europe and America to Mont Pelerin. And he said to them there at the meeting, we must make the building of a free society, his definition of a free society, once more an intellectual adventure, a deed of courage. What we lack is a vision which does not spare the susceptibilities of the mighty, which is not too severely practical, and which does not confine itself to what appears today as politically possible. I think that's a fantastic formula for trying to build a kind of a core of understandings, and then of course Hayek had this nice expression, which is that he was trying to peddle this to the peddlers of second-hand ideas. He wanted to impress the newspaper columnists, the second tier of academics. These people he was working with were top-tier academics, but he'd already marginalized John Maynard Keynes from this group, because John Maynard Keynes had his own ideas about what a new kind of liberalism might look like. And there were a number of people in the Mont Pelerin Society who wanted Keynes to be there. And Hayek wasn't having a bar of that. And so he managed to put this thing together. And essentially, the idea is, in retrospect, I suppose, is that Hayek was fairly explicit about it. And I think it has to be, if you say these things today, everyone thinks how evil, but, after the insurrection in the US and so on, who knows? But Hayek said that Hayek's view was, and many of the people in this group, their view was freedom, certain ideas of freedom turn out to be more useful for quite wealthy, well-positioned people than other people, but ideas of freedom are that a free country, it would be great if it was democratic, but if you have to choose the two things, go for freedom, not for democracy. And so they basically tried to, the market is their friend in that circumstance. And then they're saying, well, whenever you have an issue, So, for instance, Milton Friedman would argue that, yes, the discrimination against black people in the United States, where you couldn't even get served in shops and stuff, that was bad. He didn't support it, but nor did he support governments outlawing it. He wanted the market to fix that up because businesses that served black people, businesses that employed black people would have an advantage over businesses that didn't. Well, anyway, I don't think that's a very, I don't think much of that. Not many people do these days, I don't think, but it was very much, we mustn't allow government to do anything much because we've got this other mechanism, which is the market. And if people are upset, let's see if we can work that out in the market.
So I recall that Royal Society panel we were on. It took me a minute, but yeah, I think that was where I got all excited and I wanted to start talking to you, and we had lunch after that.
We did.
Because I thought you were like an Australian Don Quixote on a mission to civilize, and I wanted to audition for the role of your donkey.
You don't want to be Sancho Panza. Well, you could. Yeah, look, maybe we'll be two donkeys.
I'm not there yet. Give me another couple of years and I'll go for Sancho. Right now I'm a donkey. But that's okay. The donkey in Shrek is my favorite. Yeah, I recall that was what you cited there. Do you remember the text that I cited in that thing about stewardship of country?
No.
Well, I cited like a very important Western law text for the concept of what a steward is. And that was the Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay.
Remember, I did an impression of the steward of Gondor from Lord of the Rings?
Only very vaguely.
Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king. And so I proposed that, just like the steward, like a steward is somebody who looks after the throne while the royal family gets their shit together and produces a new heir. You know,
right.
So basically, you know, if you're going to be stewards of country, then you're going to be just looking after the place until we're able to get our sovereignty back. So anyway, that's I proposed that anyway. But the only text I could come up with to cite for that was Lord of the Rings. So I don't know. I don't think you enjoyed that very much. I did the full impression. It's a terrible scene. He's doing terrible things to cherry tomatoes while he's eating them. He's spitting stuff everywhere, and
there you are.
He ends up like trying to burn himself alive. He does burn himself alive. He's insane. So you got to look out for this. There's pitfalls in this steward role. Was my point. Anyway, I'm getting off track. We were at the at that email. So any final thing? I guess we're still struggling with this dialectic. We're not struggling with it, but we're having a little struggle session.
Well, I tell you,
I ran into coming back to that theme, bro.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. You mentioned the word dialectic. I was reading something yesterday about one of my favorite philosophers, a guy called R.G. Collingwood, which is also handy because I barracked for Collingwood. But anyway, this was an article which was it wasn't by Collingwood, but it was referring to a book of his, which I will hold up to the microphone. It's called The New Leviathan. And in it, he distinguished between two ways of arguing, two kinds of dialogue. And he referred to these, and they come from, and he cites these things from back to Plato, and he talks about eristic dialogue or eristic disagreement and dialectical disagreement. And the difference is that in eristic disagreement, two people each try to persuade the other that each argue that they're right and the other is wrong. And then you end up with a kind of a victor. And then dialectic is something quite different, and it's modeled on Socrates, who basically... Yeah,
I was just going to say that the Socratic dialectic is completely different.
So he sort of asks people to explain their position and gradually leads them to an impasse where they sort of realize they don't know what they're talking about, which is roughly that was roughly my claim about Mr. Polarity theory. And they don't know what they're talking about. And then then Socrates' response is not, oh, well, you're a lucky guy because you've met someone who does know what he's talking about. Socrates will then say, yeah, look, this is a real problem I've got too. And so what happens there, and here we've got this competition and cooperation story coming back, because
but he brings everybody, including himself, into uncertainty.
Well, yes, into the impasse. We all get to the impasse. So it undermines all of our certainty, and then together we may not end up at exactly the same place, but together we start to try and get to thinking better. We start to trying to get to a better way to see things. Meanwhile, over here, you just have two people who started the conversation, spent the whole conversation staying where they were, rehearsing how they're better than the other person, and they either win or they lose, or usually they have to agree to differ, and nothing has happened. Nothing has fucking happened.
I prefer the Socratic method, but I also feel like it feels like grooming. You've got people feels like grooming to me.
What's that?
The Socratic method feels like grooming to me sometimes, and considering historically his proclivities, it's possible. But that's all I see when I look at Foucault as well. Is that half of their theories and half of their techniques and heuristics always seem like things they've developed as grooming methods to try and get young boys into their bed. That's just and try and talk young fellas out of their trousers. That's what it all seems like to me. It's like, well,
okay, well, go if you like.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my theory. My theory is that all these old dudes were pederasts, and that half of the theories that people are building and the heuristics that people are building their stuff on is basically
they might or they might not, but they've come upon a way to converse with each other that's productive rather than reductive, and that's that's the only way we're going to get anywhere. And so we get back to competition and cooperation, which is that a conversation has a cooperative core, and if it's purely competitive, it doesn't achieve anything. The two people going into it and leaving it are exactly the same as before. So they haven't done any business together. So that's the difference, I think. And I think it was a very powerful idea. And I'll say something more, which is that we have a lot of debate which begins with definitions, pro-life, pro-choice. So then the whole debate is a kind of a positioning exercise, trying to get the upper hand given the sentiments of the people around. And the alternative is to try and notice something about the way we do something that isn't as we describe it to ourselves. And then you're on to something, because then you can look at it and you can say, well, how should we describe that? And then you can anyway, that's the way I try and do economics. Almost nobody else does it that way. But I managed to come up with some quite cool things about the internet, just noticing that the internet is a place where public goods are burgeoning, and they're privately provided. So Wikipedia is a public good, open source software is a public good, Facebook and Google are public goods, even if the service they provide is a public good, even though they're funded by advertising. Well, there's lots of interesting things to come out of that that economists are not. I won't bore you with those ideas unless you want me to right now.
But I am more interested in processes. But I know your process there. I know your methodology that you just referenced, that things you noticed. I know your methodology you've described in our previous yarns is just basically
have I?
You're just a man in the world walking around noticing shit.
That's Jerry Seinfeld.
That's your method.
That's Jerry Seinfeld. He says, you know that line? Have I given you that line before?
Walking around.
He says, girls, do you want to know what we're thinking? We're not thinking anything. We're just walking around, looking around. Well, that's the way. That's how to start something.
Yeah, that's your methodology. It should just be called, Gruen noticing shit.
Yeah, that's right. Well, noticing and then trying to build and then saying, is that thing? I mean, just noticing something can hang in the back of your mind for 10 years and it doesn't amount to anything. It's just if you notice that people call something a red rose and it's really a pink rose or something like that, and then, but some of these things that you notice, you then think, well, hang on, I can take that a lot further. I can start thinking about, I can start, so I can give you an example of this. In economics, people who study economics at university learn that there's a trade-off between efficiency and fairness. Now, why is there a trade-off between efficiency and fairness? Well, only because if you have perfect fairness, if you define it as equality of everyone gets exactly the same income and gets treated exactly the same way, it's pretty easy to believe that people won't strive to do something particularly theirs. But that's totally different to saying that in the world that we're in now, if we make it more equal, which is where there's lots of inequality, if we make it more equal, will it make it more productive or less productive? Well, of course, it depends on the way you do it. Anyway, my point is that there's no observation in any of that. What you're observing is a completely artificial world of a world where you say, well, let's say that it's a world where the market is just producing stuff. And then you say, well, if you constrain the market, it will have a cost. Well, that's all, you've achieved all that by definition. That's the way you've set it up. You haven't observed anything. You haven't said, look, I've observed these places where when they try and make a workplace fairer, it gets less productive.
Yeah, they're assuming a causal relationship, like this freaking seesaw.
Now, compare this.
They're assuming there's a seesaw in between these things that mutually go up and down.
So this is,
but no.
so here is another way to get at the same question. And it doesn't give you the answer to all, it's just a totally different way to set up the core of the question. Look at a queue forming at a bus stop. Okay, that is a human institution par excellence. Everyone in the queue's got a little thought bubble, and what does the thought bubble say? It says, I'm in a queue, that's because I need to get on the bus and we all need to get on the bus. I'd better not push in, they'd better not push in, everyone's thinking the same thing, and this is a miraculous, chimps don't queue up, chimps don't do lots of things. So these are extraordinarily human things that we're doing. Now, imagine if somebody says, they'd better not push in, I can duck in there. Well, what happens then is that that will degrade the efficiency of the queue. So in fact, the efficiency of the queue, so the efficiency of the queue is built on the fairness of the queue, because the buy-in of the people in the queue is built on the fairness of the queue.
That's so transactional. That's so transactional and so game theoretical. And I think it's the problem with economics, is that approach to things. See, from my point of view, and look, here's the thing. Your methodology, you're looking at shit, noticing shit. Different people notice different shit. So here's where dialogue comes in, and dialogue, there's your Socratic dialectic that's really important. But look, from my point of view, with this same thought experiment, this same problem, is that what are the two things offsetting each other again? Sorry, that's it, fairness and efficiency. All right, so fairness depends on relationships. Okay, relationships don't scale very well. So as your institution scales up, your relationships become more porous and less connective, as you go along. Therefore, fairness can't be guaranteed. Therefore, fairness falls apart. It has absolutely nothing to do with the efficiency itself, whether that's increased or decreased. You know what I mean? So these things aren't even connected. It's just a function of scale and how relationships do not scale very well in massive institutions. So you cited a queue there, and a queue down at the bus stop. Those are relationships in a small group that are transparent, and that's going to work well. It's very different from a bread line in Moscow. Once you scale that shit up, that's dog eat dog. Then it becomes a game theoretical fucking proposition. Then you get your multipolar traps, the fucking tragedy of the commons, bloody blah, and on we go.
Yeah, well, that's true. I was saying, I guess what I'm getting at is that that is if you want some general observation about the relationship between equity or fairness and efficiency, that one that I've suggested is a building block, a starting point, which is empirical, and the other one is not empirical at all. The other one is completely abstract. But it's but I'd also, on the question of scale, when I look at what upsets people about their workforce, and in large workforces, most large workforces are a bit of a train wreck, and what upsets them most is unfairness, but also inefficiency, actually, just sort of stupidity when they get told to do something and they can see that what needs to be done is over here, but they're not going to be respected enough for them to take an hour off and do what really needs to be done, because they're being managed in a million ways. So it's the same idea, which is that people buying into these structures is terribly important from the inside. And that's a point about scaling, that one of the reasons things don't scale very well is that once you scale, you tend to build explicit explicit rule-based formal approaches, and the world can't be contained within those things.
There is an efficiency trade-off dichotomy that happens I've noticed in computing. I found it when I was messing around with evolutionary computing and trying to breed algorithms. But the trade-off is that the more efficient an algorithm is, or a system is, the less complex it can be. The less diverse / complex it can be. So you need, for efficiency, you need simplicity. So they're talking to me. When I was first introduced to the idea, it was introduced with a racing camels method. So if you're breeding racing camels, then you're going to want it to be fairly aerodynamic. So you want to reduce the size of the hump, but at the same time, if he doesn't have enough hump, you're going to die in the desert. So there's always that trade-off. That trade-off with the efficiency and speed, and then the complexity of the beast. So that's the thing. So I do know, and I think that's a fairly good. I think that's a law of nature that you can find in computing and in everything, is that there is always that trade-off between efficiency and complexity. And so I think if you're looking at fairness and social justice as something that occurs in in natural systems, things are just distributed, and it just happens. You don't end up with things being hoarded in one spot and all that kind of stuff. Things just get distributed. There's movement in a healthy system. So I think the idea of fairness and equality, I think that's just a natural state for a system, and I think that just happens with complexity. A system that is complex will have a kind of a distributive sort of model going on.
We'll have a bunch of simple things in it.
And therefore, it's not going to be very fucking efficient for extraction. You know what I mean? If you want to extract from that system, you have to reduce the complexity of that system. You have to you have to basically create entropy within that system and enclosures within that system in order to make it manageable, so that you can maximize the efficiency of extraction.
You undermine buy-in. That's another way to put it. People know they're getting ripped off, they're getting disrespected, and this is something good old Adam Smith, the founder of modern economics, said, that slavery looked like the cheapest form of labor, but was in fact the most expensive, because the slave has no incentive to notice something and say, oh, we could do that better, because not only will all the gain from making it better go to someone else, but they'll probably get a clip over the ears for being lazy.
That's it.
So the idea of having systems which with layers of respect is something that he sort of sketched out in his appreciation of slavery. Oh
my God. See, that's just. I mean, you always think about it, and you think, man, what would I do? What would I do?
Enslaved?
To be a slave. What would be your incentive to keep going? And you'd be sitting there trying to think of a motivation to continue, and then
Yeah.
Yep. I'm moving. I'm doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let me just read you one of my favorite quotes in the whole of Adam Smith. Adam Smith was famously kind of urbane and cosmopolitan, not a very passionate sort of guy.
Yeah. And now he sort of exists in this weird libertarian pantheon at the moment. He gets elevated by all kinds of weirdos.
Yeah, well, that's not the way he thought about human beings.
No.
But now you're going to so just a little bit of preparation. So William Wilberforce, the guy who kind of spearheaded abolition in the United Kingdom. He's in short pants at this time. This guy's writing in 1761, and I hope I don't offend you or anyone by using the word savage, because that's the word he uses, but I'll read you what he says. The other thing I want to tell you is that Adam Smith's first job, if you like, his first lectureship was in rhetoric. What does rhetoric do? Let's see if I can remember.
Brilliant.
This.
I love it how you introduced that idea with a rhetorical question. What does rhetoric do? Yeah. Anyway, keep going.
It persuades as it. Oh shit! Let me. It does three things, which is it persuades, it explains, as it delights.
It's beautiful. It must be.
It's entertaining, but it's very and the other thing that rhetoric does. The other thing that rhetoric does is that it blames vice and praises virtue.
Yeah,
that's classical rhetoric. Is to speak well of the heroes and badly of the villains and all that sort of stuff.
It's so here's like the culture wars without the warfare.
So here's the passage.
Ritualized.
Here's the passage, and Smith is very unusual because he seems to be one of these people who doesn't have much racism in his body. You know, like David Hume, his great friend, great philosopher, and about 10 years older, has said some horrible things about natives being stupider and all the rest of it. And Smith didn't believe that, and he thought that. The way to get rich was to respect people at the bottom, and they'll come up with great ideas. Anyway, this is the passage. Every savage undergoes a sort of Spartan discipline, and by the necessity of his situation is inured to every sort of hardship. Fortune never exerted more cruelly her empire over mankind than when she subjected those nations of heroes to the refuse of the jails of Europe, to wretches who possess the virtues neither of the countries which they come from, nor of those which they go to, and whose levity, brutality, and baseness so justly expose them to the contempt of the vanquished. Oh, I love that.
Wow.
That's
pretty. Definitely read that out on Australia Day. I think a lot of people would cheer.
Yeah. Well, I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you, and you can put it up. It's such a wonderful passage.
Yeah.
Such a 1761. 1761. Nobody's talked about abolition, slavery. This industrialized form of racial chattel slavery has been going on for a century or more. Is getting
not even talking about that. He's talking about dispossession and but well. But then this process of what's happening to these wretches.
Yeah. So a great man.
But he's getting a bit Rousseau there. Here, look, I'll show you another. I'll give you another. This is how I'm dealing. With the dichotomy, the Rousseau and Hobbes dichotomy. I'm doing it with comedy.
Very good idea.
All right, so I'm going to read you. I don't know. I've been messing around with an intro to the book today.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'll read you up until I'll read up until Hobbes and Rousseau anyway, so you can see how I'm dealing with it. All right. This is definitely going to change, and this is just how I was playing with it this morning. This book contains nothing that will save the world. It's basically a list of 12 ways to avoid lists in the Anthropocene, some jokes and horror stories, a few traces of good sense that future alien archaeologists can dig up to discover that not all of us Homo sapiens were greedy bastards. Mostly, I just don't want the word homo to become a slur again in 1,000 years across the entire galaxy. That would be really bad. Also, it's always comforting to know that your smug ghost will be able to drift around a blasted landscape forever, wheezing, "I told you so." Maybe you're one of these people who's really into self-help and New Age spirituality. Gosh, you're going to be disappointed. Personal development, like development in general, is a combination of the stupidest parts of science and the stupidest parts of spirituality. And I think it's hastened the death of the planet over the last century. But that opinion is just part of my story. Yours is equally important, so I'm happy to find you here, although I'm not going to be doing any trust falls or breathing exercises with you, sorry. I also won't be holding space for you, whatever the hell that means. Maybe you're one of these people who says that facts don't care about your feelings, or the data doesn't lie. I respect you too. Come and sit down, have a cup of tea, because we're going to science the shit out of this messed up world right now, and that job is best begun with a yarn around the hearth, as always. Data says nothing without analysis, and analysis is guided by our narratives. So bring your story around the fire here, because we need all our stories to make this analysis work, including yours. You are welcome. Even if you're a toxic, bad faith, murderous, gaslighting piece of shit, you are needed and you are loved. We're on flat country here. No moral high ground to be had. And I'm one of the... No, hang on. My friends are all here, and I respect every one of them. My buddies Hobbes and Rousseau are both here. You know them too? Hobbes said our ancestors had short lives of brutish misery and primitive ignorance, and Rousseau said they were noble savages living in a paradise. But they're together here, sitting at the edge of the firelight, scared, confused, and crying as they begin awkwardly kissing. For some reason, they're naked from the waist down like Winnie the Pooh. Anyway, I kind of got carried away at that point.
It's great. It's fabulous. I love it. I really love it.
I'm going to cut it off.
I really love it. I think it's fabulous. You should really keep going with it.
So I think there's something...
If you wanted to, I don't know how you do these things. If you want to send me the draft, I'd love to. I mean, I'll sort of...
yeah, man, I certainly will. Because there's heaps of Nicholas there. Fabulous. I need to finish up I've just got another...
Yeah.
I have to do another chapter. Our chapter, the one that we did together, it's just the business isn't finished, and we're going to finish it in this yarn here today.
Well... Yeah, all right. Well,
but I want
we're going to finish it in this yarn.
Not
okay.
Yes, there's a Socratic dialectic, okay, but there I think I'm proposing a Untitled dialectic. All right,
fair enough.
Which involves
you've got to get your branding out there, Tyson. You've got to get the branding out.
Everybody's got to take the piss out of each other and have a good laugh together. Yeah, you've got to be able to laugh at yourself, and then then out of the laugh to just see what's left. See the bits that are left. I think there has to be some kind of comedic scrutiny in here, because the Stoics are almost there. The new Stoics, they're all obsessed with like steel manning each other's position. So for that, I would have to come over and argue your point as Nicholas, in order to understand and what they call inhabit your position. So they do all this Stoic stuff, all this Marcus Aurelius shit. And that's pretty cool. But you know what? They're not very funny. Stoics are fucking boring, man. Yeah. It's awesome to talk to them because you never feel too threatened, and you feel loved and quite held. And you actually come up with some productive stuff. Yeah. But it's not much fun. Yeah, look. Yeah. I've been long hats. Beautiful. Yeah, so this is what ended up how the boomerang ended up. It lost a lot of mass, but there's a solid core through there. There's a solid core through there of what I don't know. I've been honing in my conversations with you, which is kind of like it's a disdain for that flaccid. What did you call before? Flaccid.
I described a passage as conceptually flaccid.
Conceptually flaccid. All right. I want conceptually turgid. I want
Not turgid.
I want fully tumescent.
Well, I'm not sure we tumescent exactly.
Concepts.
Conceptual.
So
you need
what I'm talking about is
conceptual
rigor.
tumescence. Yes, that's right.
Rigor mortis.
Well, that's where the comedy is the detumescence.
I think it's the detumescence of the of bad faith. And I think
comedy, as you know, we saw our first
comedy strips everything back, and then
you've
only got good faith left. And maybe that's what I've done here with this boomerang. I've laughed my way through smashing the edges off the Enlightenment and the Age of Reason, and I'm happy with what's left as potentially going forward. And part of it is, I think part of the scientific method. I'm really into quite a lot of the scientific method. I like the idea of that kind of general skepticism. And the stuff that can burn through people who just make shit up, you know, because you don't want to be in a position where you never ever believe anything that hasn't already been proven by somebody at an earlier date.
Well, especially if you don't want to jump out of a plane with a parachute.
But you also don't want to be a credulous prick that's going along to a bloody an integral theory coaching seminar, you know, at some corporation, you know, with a $500 a plate bloody dinner or something like that, and just swallow this entire, you know, gammon theory, hook, line, and sinker. You know what I mean? So I don't know. So I like that, the idea that there is this scientific rigor, that there is this testing, that there is this commitment to I'm not just going to accept at face value that there's turtles all the way down. I want to have a good look first. So I like that. I've kept a few other things, you know, but you can look in that last episode for that, where I'm talking with Jamie Wheel a fair bit, and but it was the bit that I really wanted to talk to you about was this how I just arbitrarily cut off the entire Magna Carta, but it was just out of pure. There it is there.
Oh,
so
and why is that the Magna Carta?
Well, it was just because of our last yarn. We were talking about the Magna Carta, you were particularly talking about the jury system, and with Jamie Wheel yesterday, I was talking about the idea of the that everybody comes under the law, that nobody's above the law, that concept, even in the divine right of kings, no man's above the fucking law. That's pretty cool in the Magna Carta. But so, you know, it wasn't very good that I arbitrarily cut it off. But I couldn't see, there was too much. Okay, there's you see this wormhole in there? Yeah. That wormhole and that rot, that goes right through that piece. That's right through the guts of it.
It's beautiful wood. What sort of wood is it?
And I could cut that off, but it's going to make the whole boomerang weak. So it's it's this kind of acacia. It's not gidgee, but it's close. It's not mulga. It's not gidgee, but it's close. It's a particular species that you get out Wilcannia and Cohen way. So it's from way out there. I was really lucky to get a good bit of that. But this bit that I've cut off, I cut it off and I didn't discard it. I mean, here's democracy, by the way, from the other end. I don't know if you want that as well. I could send you that bit.
Sure. If you want to give it to me.
I thought, I'm going to make this into a message stick for Nicholas. I could do two. You could have the democracy end as well.
Absolutely.
But they're related because of your proposition about using the jury system.
Absolutely, they are
Magna Carta for
absolutely
for democracy. So I figured that those
for the cooperative part, lovely. For the cooperative part of our society, we get people at random and we say, you are the society, and you're helping us work out the terms of our cooperation so that we can also do things differently to each other, subject to rules that represent all of us.
Sweet. Well, look, if you're prepared to accept these as blank message sticks, blank except for their topic and the limited amount that I know, then that's got to feel better about it. Because most of the thing I cut it away and I discarded. The sawdust, the shavings, the big chunks that I cut off, and I discarded them or threw them on the fire. But these bits, I didn't want to chuck them. I thought, no, I'll keep these for Nicholas. Because I'm not rejecting them. It's just they're going to be used for something else, I think. Anyway, and this in the end became a comeback boomerang, which I hardly ever make comeback boomerangs. So
yes, I know. I heard you describing that to your Mr. Wheel.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a beautiful thing. I'm going to post that one off to
It
him.
is a beautiful thing. It is
And
a
then,
beautiful
but
thing.
I'm also going to spend a bit of time with the remainder of my week making up these lovely message sticks for you, Nicholas. And then they're
Fantastic.
yours to, you can put all the things into them of what's going to work. Because I
Cool.
think you're into the business end of things. So I think it's cool that I cut the business ends off that boomerang. The business ends that made it into a big war boomerang, I cut them off, and I've like basically emasculated it down into this comeback boomerang, which is basically a toy. But you get to keep the business end.
Yeah.
Just the tip.
Cool.
Just the tip, Nicholas.
Yeah.
And we'll see what we'll see what goes on with that. Anyway, I'm gonna make some out of that, and I'll send them to you in the next week.
Well, that's fantastic. So we should have a conversation at some stage about whether you should be thinking about what you're doing with it as science, or whether you should be thinking of it more like from the point of view of how would a sporting coach a team to do as well as it can, which is not science. I mean, science comes into it, but science is just.
Well, I think I need to be honest. I need to be honest about what I'm doing, because I think that's it's useful.
Yeah.
I think I need to be honest about what I'm doing, and I don't think I should be trying to tweak it or dress it up as something that it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I need to be
But
honest
that's not
about
that's one side of science.
Yeah.
So science doesn't work very well in thinking about people. Of course, it has, anything you're trying to do has to be reality based. So I'm not suggesting you're not reality based. A coach of a football team is reality based, but the science part of it is a small part. And then the question, and there's the thing about science is that science typically, the methods of science typically presuppose the reality is out there and we're in here. And in the human world, yes, reality is out there, but we are part of that. But everyone is in a reciprocal relation of being part of the reality for each other, which is actually the core of Adam Smith's first book, as you will know, called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, where he talks about us. Well, he uses this term sympathy, but this is
nice reach around back to Adam Smith there. That was deadly.
Well, I'll send you a few essays that I've written. I've written an essay called, I don't know whether I've told you about it before. It's called Adam Smith is to Markets as Jane Austen is to Marriage. And hey. And I'm quite serious about it, because what he's saying is in exactly the same way that Jane Austen isn't saying to her readers, go and get married and you'll live happily ever after. She's saying marriage is an honorable estate. If you bring your best self to marriage and you are with someone else with the same intention, you will have a better life together. And Adam Smith's saying something similar about markets. And he's quite, anyway, the building block of life, of human life, according to Smith, is this notion of sympathy, but we can't even hear that word without it making
over the helicopters.
Well, we can't hear that word sympathy without it making us feel rather sentimental. And he actually means it as much as a method of cognition. How do I know how Tyson's feeling? I have to imagine myself in his position, because that's all I have. It's not a great way to know what Tyson's thinking. It's just the only way to know what Tyson's thinking. It's
just empathy. And I keep saying empathy's training wheels for people who don't know how to relate yet.
So he's trying to build I won't call it a science of humanity, although he would have called it a science, but, well, not a science, but he called it, that's kind of a moral philosophy, he would have called it. But it's not the science that got us to the moon and back. This is thinking about human beings being a human being. One is a human being, one is thinking about human beings. They are out there, but they're also relating to us. And this is a construction of mutual relation. And that is, anyway, that sounds all very...
but I love how that feeds into, like, right from the start, randomly with that email that we picked, it's ended up making us grapple with this dialectic again. And look, this finishes it off with the idea. I tried to find the bit that I was writing to describe what it is that I'm doing. with this work, with these books and everything. Like you said, you asked me, so, and I was saying, yeah, I just don't want to lie about what it is. I don't want to call it science.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
you know what I mean?
Well, that is
at the
where
same time, I want to do that with as much scientific rigor as a novice can muster. And I want to bring everyone else with me. I want to bring everybody else along for that ride of but it's like, fuck this yes and. I'm sick of yes and. I want more people going but and having a good look and having a good sniff around and not just to win some points in a goddamn debate. We're all idiots except
so you're
anyway, so I'm going to read this to you.
Yeah,
because it brings it back to the dialectic and the opposites.
It is a master class in some sort of, is that what you're talking about?
That's it. I'll read it out to you.
Yeah, go. So, you read it.
This is how I'm describing the book. It's a master class in some sort of indigenized hipster pop science I've fallen ass backwards into over the last few years. It makes sarcasm into an art form in which we perform skepticism in order to highlight our faith, play the disruptive trickster to foster stability, mourn the end to celebrate the beginning, and then randomly mash together opposite ideas in order to foster the illusion of ancient wisdom. And maybe that's all a dialectic is randomly mashing opposite ideas together in order to seem wise. Maybe it's bullshit. Maybe there's no such thing as two ways, both ways, third culture, cultural interface, all of this stuff, the dialectic. Maybe it's all bollocks.
Yeah. So go and, if you haven't already, you can get it on YouTube. Go and watch the last 5 minutes of Casablanca. Same thing.
You always tell me to do this.
Oh, have I? Have I done that before?
No, it's you have, and I do always do it. YouTube's helpful.
But I love it because
I'm just suggesting that perhaps the dialectic, Hegel, everything else, maybe that was the original conceptually flaccid management heuristic.
Well, it was. It was. Yeah, I've already told you. I'm pretty sure I've already told you that Hegel said that he late in his life that he never really understood his own philosophy till he read it in French translation. I think that's so funny because he's just so. It's like it's like you're in a big smoke-filled dark box and you've got no idea what's going on. But that's good. But I want to say, Tyson, you're shooting high, and I absolutely want to salute that because most people would be looking at their metrics, seeing what tweets get most retweets, thinking of their audience, thinking of their publisher, and you're trying to do something much harder and much better than that.
Like I said, I'm auditioning for donkey. Like Nicholas Gruel's donkey already. I'm auditioning for the role of the donkey, so I gotta.
And you won't ever do it perfectly. And you won't ever do it perfectly. And amen to that, because it means that you're really whenever anyway. I think it's fantastic, and that's a voice. When you go, people will honestly be able to say, we will not see his like again. I haven't seen this sort of stuff. Have you? I haven't seen this kind of writing from Indigenous people. Is there any? Give me some other names.
Well, I don't
know. I'm no expert.
Writing, I'm not aware of any. I'm not aware of any kitchen table in an Indigenous household that doesn't have this voice around it. That doesn't have this way.
Yeah. I can agree with that. I can agree with that
going on.
Yeah.
Where we don't have it is in our middle classes, and unfortunately, those of us who get to write have quite an investment in being middle class and in the middle class.
Of course.
And in the project, the middle class project.
So one of the things
we tend to lose that, and we're scared that we're going to lose our position. Why wouldn't we? Because we don't have any fucking capital. It's just that I don't even care, and I just know that. I mean, I'm just not that. I'm not that interested in life to the point where I care too much about having capital in a few years. I don't know what the fuck I'm going to be doing, and whether I'm even going to be here in a few years. So I don't even care. I just do whatever.
So
it's not admirable. It's a carelessness. It's not coming out of anything it's not coming
Did you
out of
did
any
you
higher
say did you
ideals.
say
It's coming out
did
of
you
not
say that it
just
hang on a minute.
careless.
Hang on. Did you say it's not honorable? It's out of carelessness?
No, it's not admirable. It's not coming out of
Admirable.
any
Well,
high
it is,
ideals
it
or
is
anything.
admirable. It is admirable because you are trying to speak the truth, and speaking the truth is hard. It requires living in something and saying, no, I don't think I can quite, I don't think the way I've seen this thing described, the way I've read this thing being described, the way I've heard this thing being described, it doesn't satisfy me as the truth. I'll have to try and put my finger on it. And that well, it doesn't have to be admirable. If you're hungry, there are other
Sometimes the
more
truth
admirable
is
things to do.
surreal. Sometimes the truth is Hobbes and
Well,
Rousseau
that's true too.
awkwardly
That's true
kissing
too.
naked from the waist
But
down
this
in the
this
firelight.
is this yeah. I think that's hilarious. Now, the other thing I was going to say is, firstly, I don't, I'm not well. I don't know. Haven't read lots of Indigenous authors, so me saying, tell me another Indigenous author like this. Maybe there are plenty of them, but one of the things, and this, I don't know whether you'll like this or not, but this reminds of that passage, and what we're talking about the way you're writing actually reminds me of the art of Lynn Onus, which is a kind of brilliantly, some kind of inhabiting this space between these two cultures in a way that is your own.
You'll find it. You'll find it all through the arts. This kind of cheekiness.
That
you're referring to, and it just hasn't come through in literature yet.
Yeah, I think that might be right.
Like I said, it's in the discourse around every single kitchen table. There's always at least one person who's the cheeky one, and that's the one that just, you know what I mean? It's just.
I do know exactly what you mean.
And I guess this opens. I don't know. I would like to see more of those people having the work out there in whatever the medium is. But usually that's in oral form, and when people are doing it, and you can see some of our comedians do it verbally, orally, incredibly funny stuff out there. Great Indigenous comedy. And so you see it a lot in comedy, but you see it in a few different art forms, and maybe it'll start coming out in books as well, because I think there's a hunger for it. There's a place for it.
Well, there's a hunger for it, and I think it might be, a form that has a lot of influence outside of the Aboriginal community. Because if you paint something, well, a painting doesn't tell people, oh, this means I shouldn't have done that last Wednesday, or I think I'm going to do this thing differently. It's in a different register, in a different realm. Whereas writing this stuff is, I can certainly relate to the European side of what you're writing about, the way in which we are drenched in cliches and sentimentality, the way in which no one would ever want us to think in Australia, because they'd like us to say things that remind them of what the last person they watched on TV said, rather than say something somewhat differently, rather than take the time to say, hang on a minute, I've been walking around, looking around, and the way we're talking about that isn't quite what happens. Let me tell you what I think is happening. Now, you're adding humor to that in a fantastic way as well. So
but it is, you just made me think about it, and it could be a bit trickier than that for other Indigenous people to do, because, most of us are dignified people who are firmly grounded in our identity and our being in a more dignified age. And looking forward and trying to have some continuity between that and the dignified age that we're working towards to make sure that comes as well. Most of us are living in that dignity, and there is a kind of a nobility to that. Dignity is the best
but there's also the humor. But that's why I think your humor.
There is that humor, but there's still dignity to it. I don't know. But for me, I consider myself to be like an undignified person who is the product of an undignified age. And while I feel a lot of nostalgia and a lot of connection to that age of dignity, and I feel a longing for that, I know that I don't have that. And I've spent too much time in just horrendous indignity to ever even know how to be dignified again. I have no idea.
Tyson,
I have no idea how
you
I would
say,
ever recover any kind of self-respect
well,
or anything like that.
I'll tell you precisely. I'll tell you precisely.
I'm able to go to those places where others can't go for shame. Shame would prevent people going to the places that I go to.
Yeah, but hang on a minute. But that's where I want you put this thing up on the chat thing, what you just read to me, and your relationship with dignity, you're being prepared to live in what you're thinking of as indignity, is surely mourning the end to celebrate the beginning. That must be what it is. It is.
Look there.
It is. That's what it is. It is to speak the truth, to then be able to start from the truth, not from fucking bullshit, not from cliches.
Well, that was supposed to be a joke, but there's some truth in that joke, Nicholas.
No, well, but jokes deal with these dialectical realities in our lives.
Yeah, there's this idea that every joke is an in-joke, that it's something that we share. I think we've talked about that before.
Well, it is. It is.
And that's the risk when you put it out there. You've got to hope to hell that that other person actually understands what you're talking about, and that you have a shared understanding around that. Otherwise, it's not going to land.
But the joke of the joke is that we can't understand. That's what's funny, that we actually are participating, imagining we're understanding things, and then the joke shows us that we actually are not understanding.
Well, that's the discovery. That's the discovery part of the joke.
But it goes round and round.
And that particularly comes in the taglines after the punchline. You can riff on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I think we're onto something. The worst, I joked about calling it Socratic Dialectic before. Something I know is true. Something I know to be true is that the minute you give something a name, that's it. It's over. It's finished. It's ruined.
Well, it's great for marketing.
Exactly. Once you give it a name, it's marketable. Once it's marketable, it's finished.
Well, you can say, I can imagine you putting on a show and you can say, well, Space Cadets, it's time to get out of your teleporter and get into your Yunka porter. What do you reckon? Hey.
Look, we could do all these things. I've been doing a personal joke in all of the invitations I send you to these yarns. I go, Gru Porter.
What's that?
I put Gru and Porter together.
Oh,
so I'm calling these yarns Gru Porter.
Oh, I get you. Okay.
And Gru is Latin for crane, for the bird crane, which is what a brolga is. And the whole idea, Yunka Porter is about, it means brolga legs.
Yeah.
So
does it?
So I mashed together the different parts of that word.
So you're good. Well, you like brolgas ahead of venues, don't you?
And bastardized Wick to make that happen, that little joke. It was just an in-joke for myself, that one. But now I've shared it with you and everyone else too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a very good joke. Anyway, bros. Well, Gruen, Nicholas Gruen, with your Latin brolga name there. That's a Grus Rubicundus is the
good.
taxon.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Particular one. All right, Brad. Well, that was a hell of a yarn. That was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, it was. It was good.
Do this one. I don't think we'll need to edit it much either. I actually learned editing recently, so I can actually.
Oh, good. Well, feel free to send me the video because I can get it sort of chopped up.
You can do your thing with your marketing and your tweet.
Yeah, my marketing. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I had the very first one we did, somebody chopped it up into about 20 little segments, and I posted about 4 or 5 of them, and then I got shy and I thought people are just going to think I'm an absolute media tart. But what the hell? I don't have any large institutions behind me, so I've got to do the best I can.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. Well, we all struggle. Try and keep our heads above water and stop and make sure we're not gamming. Exactly. Sometimes we just gammon whether we like it or not.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, right, Tyson, great to talk. Okay.
Catch you later. Bye.
See ya.